November 1943. A Soviet listening post in the Siberian Arctic. 3 men on a classified mission. But something was hunting them. Not enemy soldiers, not Japanese scouts. Something that attacked memory itself. Something that could erase you from existence, not just kill you, make it so you never existed at all. This is the classified file they tried to forget. The photograph they couldn't erase. The testimony that survived because 3 soldiers refused to vanish. If this story stays with you, subscribe. Because some military encounters were never meant to be declassified. This is Post 47. The snow didn't fall in Kolyma. It moved sideways, driven by wind that could strip flesh from bone in under an hour. I watched it through the observation slit of Post 47, my breath forming ice crystals on the concrete interior. The thermometer outside read -43 Celsius. Inside, with the diesel heater running, we maintained a tropical -15. Junior Sergeant Dmitri Volkov, NKVD Border Troops, 3rd Special Reconnaissance Company. 22 years old, though the Arctic added a decade to every face it touched. I'd been assigned to this frozen edge of the motherland for 8 months, monitoring radio frequencies along the Lend-Lease corridor. The Americans shipped supplies through Alaska, across the Bering Strait, down through Siberia to the Western Front. Someone had to make sure the Japanese weren't listening. That someone was us. Post 47 sat 200 kilometers from anything resembling civilization. A concrete bunker half buried in permafrost, radio masts rising like skeletal fingers, fuel depot, and 3 auxiliary buildings connected by rope lines. You didn't walk between structures without clipping on. Men had been found 3 meters from a doorway, frozen solid, turned around in whiteout conditions. 5 of us manned the station. Sergeant Major Alexei Sokolov ran operations, 50 years old, missing 2 fingers from the Winter War against Finland. He taught me that Arctic survival meant trusting nothing, especially your own senses. Private Ivan Kuznetsov operated the radio equipment, a Moscow Technical School graduate too valuable for the front lines. Corporal Mikhail Orlov served as our political officer, though his main contribution involved reading Pravda aloud during meals and ensuring our reports praised Stalin sufficiently. Then there was Private Yuri Petrov, local Yakut, recruited for his tracking skills. He rarely spoke, spent most of his time outside checking perimeter markers and fuel stores. The cold didn't seem to touch him the way it touched the rest of us. When he did speak, it was usually to warn us about something. Bad ice, approaching storms, or the wolf packs that occasionally tested our defenses. November 17th, 1943. Standard morning routine. Kuznetsov monitoring frequencies, Sokolov reviewing supply inventories, Orlov writing another report about morale and revolutionary spirit. I was on perimeter check, following the rope line to the fuel depot. That's when I noticed the footprints. Not unusual in itself. We all made tracks around the post, but these prints ran parallel to our established paths, exactly parallel, about 10 meters out. Single file, human boots. They emerged from blank tundra, no origin point visible, circled the entire compound, and disappeared back into emptiness on the far side. I followed them as far as the rope line allowed. The prints were fresh, probably made during last night's storm. But the stride length was wrong, too long. Each step covered nearly 2 meters. No human walked like that, not in Arctic conditions, not without snowshoes. Sergeant Major. I found Sokolov in the main bunker, cleaning his Mosin Nagant rifle with diesel-soaked cloth. We had a visitor last night. He listened to my report without interruption, his 3-fingered hand never pausing in its work. When I finished, he set the rifle down and reached for his coat. Show me. The prints were already filling with fresh snow. We had maybe 2 hours before they vanished completely. Sokolov knelt beside them, his experienced eyes reading details I'd missed. He pointed to the depth. No snowshoes, full weight on bare boot. But look, no pressure variance. Each print identical depth. He was right. A man walking normally shifted weight, especially in snow. These tracks showed machine precision. Could be Japanese reconnaissance, I offered. New equipment, special training. The Japanese are 2,000 kilometers southeast. Sokolov stood, brushing ice from his knees. And they're not suicidal enough to send scouts into Kolyma winter. Not for radio intelligence they could intercept remotely. We followed the prints for 30 meters. They maintained that eerie parallel course, never approaching closer, never diverging. Then Sokolov stopped. Ahead of us, the track split. No, not split. They multiplied. One line of footprints became 2, then 4, then 8. All identical, all maintaining the same impossible stride, all branching from a single point like some geometric hallucination. They spread outward in perfect radial symmetry before converging again 50 meters ahead, reforming into a single trail that vanished toward the horizon. "Get Petrov," Sokolov said quietly. "Now." I found the Yakut private at the generator shed, replacing fuel filters. His dark eyes showed no surprise when I described what we'd found. He wiped his hands on a rag, slow and deliberate, before speaking. "How many watched you?" "What?" "When you saw the prints, how many eyes did you feel on your back?" The question lodged in my chest like ice, because I had felt something during that perimeter check. The specific sensation of being observed, counted, measured. I'd attributed it to paranoia, to Arctic isolation playing tricks with my mind. "I don't know what you mean." Petrov stood, his expression grave. "My grandmother's people have a name for what walks in circles around places where men gather. Ijiraq. The one who hides in peripheral vision. The one who makes you forget." "Forget what?" "Who you came here with." He walked past me toward the main bunker. I followed, suddenly conscious of the fact that I couldn't quite remember how many of us were stationed at Post 47. 5, yes, definitely 5. But when I tried to picture all 5 faces simultaneously, the count slipped. 4, 6, the number wouldn't hold steady in my mind. We gathered in the radio room. Sokolov had called an immediate briefing. I counted heads as everyone assembled. Sokolov, Kuznetsov, Orlov, Petrov, myself. 5. "Perimeter breach," Sokolov began. "Unknown party circled the post during last night's storm. Tracks indicate single individual, possibly using specialized equipment. Until we determine—" "Where's Fedorov?" Orlov interrupted. Silence. We looked at each other. "Who?" Kuznetsov asked. "Private Fedorov, assigned here same time as Volkov." Orlov's face had gone pale. "Ukrainian, worked the night radio shift. Where is he?" I searched my memory. No Fedorov. 5 of us had always staffed Post 47. The roster was clear. But Orlov seemed genuinely convinced, and his confusion was spreading. "There is no Fedorov on our assignment roster," Sokolov said, but his voice carried uncertainty. "Corporal, show me the documentation." Orlov moved to the filing cabinet with trembling hands. He pulled out personnel records, spread them across the radio desk. 5 folders. Sokolov, Kuznetsov, Orlov, Petrov, Volkov. No Fedorov. "I remember him," Orlov whispered. "I wrote a commendation report 3 weeks ago for his radio discipline. I remember his face, Ukrainian accent. He told stories about growing up in Kiev. I remember—" "You remember nothing," Petrov said quietly. "It wants you to remember nothing. That's how it feeds." Kuznetsov stood abruptly from his radio station. "I'm picking up something. Audio anomaly on the emergency frequency." He increased the volume. Through the speaker, hiss came breathing. Not static interference, but actual human respiration. Slow, deliberate, close to the microphone. Then a voice, Russian but wrong. Each word pronounced with mechanical precision, no natural rhythm. 5 men at Post 47. Tomorrow 4. Tomorrow 3. Tomorrow we forget we were ever more than 1. The transmission ended. Kuznetsov's hands shook over the equipment. "That was broadcast from inside the compound," he said. Signal strength indicates transmission origin less than 20 meters from this building. But we were all here. All 5 of us. Weren't we? I tried to count again. The number kept sliding away from me like oil on ice. Sokolov ordered a compound lockdown. No one outside without a partner, weapons loaded, radio checks every 30 minutes. We moved through Post 47 like ghosts, each of us trying to hold onto a count that refused to stay fixed. I drew patrol duty with Petrov. The Yakut private moved through the blowing snow with practiced efficiency, checking doors, testing locks, examining the ground for fresh prints. He carried his rifle differently than the rest of us, barrel down, ready for something that might come from below rather than the horizon. "Your grandmother," I said, breaking the Arctic silence. "What did she tell you about the Ijiraq?" Petrov stopped at the fuel depot entrance, his breath forming ice clouds. That it hunts memory, not flesh. It consumes the space you occupied in others' minds. When it finishes, you never existed at all. No family mourns, no grave is dug. The world closes over the gap you left like water over a stone. "That's not possible." "You tell me, Sergeant. How many men are stationed here?" I started to answer, stopped. The count dissolved before I could speak it. I knew my own name. Petrov beside me, Sokolov commanding, Kuznetsov on radio, Orlov with his political reports. 5. But there were 6 bunks in the sleeping quarters. I'd walked past them every day for 8 months. 6 bunks. Why 6 bunks for 5 men? We completed the patrol and returned to find Kuznetsov frantic at his radio station. He'd been attempting to contact regional command at Magadan for the past hour. Every frequency showed active carrier signals, but no response. Just that same mechanical breathing, getting closer to the microphone with each transmission attempt. "It's jamming us," Kuznetsov said. "Sophisticated electronic warfare, but the equipment required, no one could deploy it in these conditions. The power requirements alone, it's not equipment." Petrov sat cleaning his rifle, methodical and calm. It mimics, copies, becomes what it observes. Japanese scouts used radios near the border last year. Now it knows how to use them too. Orlov slammed his fist on the table. "Enough primitive superstition. There's a rational explanation. Enemy infiltration, experimental technology, psychological warfare. We follow protocol, document everything, request immediate extraction." "Using what radio?" Sokolov asked quietly. The question hung in the frozen air. Our only link to command breathed at us through speakers, pronouncing words in that terrible mechanical cadence. We were isolated. Completely. "We wait for supply run," Sokolov decided. "Next scheduled arrival is in 6 days. Until then, we maintain watch rotation, document all anomalies, and stay together. No one alone. Ever." He looked at each of us. I watched him count silently. His expression darkened. "Where's the political officer?" Orlov sat 3 meters away, right there, at the table, writing in his logbook like he did every evening. We could all see him. Couldn't we? I turned to look directly at him. For a moment, the image held. Corporal Mikhail Orlov, dark hair, thin face, always cold despite layers of wool. Then my eyes slipped, like trying to focus on something in peripheral vision. When I looked away, I could see him clearly. Direct gaze. Nothing. "He's here," I said, right at the... But when I pointed, my hand indicated empty space. Sokolov stood slowly. "Everyone, look at the table. Don't look at each other. Tell me what you see." "Empty bench," Kuznetsov whispered. 4 chairs occupied, Petrov confirmed. "No 5. I could see Orlov, sort of. A suggestion of him. The impression of presence without actual substance. "He's sitting right..." The radio crackled. That voice again, Orlov's voice, but wrong, each syllable perfectly formed with no human warmth. Corporal Mikhail Orlov, born Leningrad 1919, posted Post 47 March 1943. Tomorrow no one remembers. Tomorrow never existed. Tomorrow just 4 men wondering why they have 5 chairs. The transmission ended. When I looked at the table again, there were only 4 of us. The memory of Orlov was already fading. Political officer? Yes, there had been one. What was his name? What did he look like? Gone. Kuznetsov started screaming, high and thin, the sound of a man watching his mind come apart. Sokolov slapped him hard, the crack echoing in the bunker. "Control yourself, Private. That's an order." Kuznetsov's breath came in ragged gasps. "We're being erased, one by one. It's eating us from reality itself. How do we fight something that attacks memory?" "We document." Sokolov moved to the filing cabinet with sudden purpose. "Write everything down. Names, details, physical evidence that can't be forgotten." We spent the next hour creating a record. Personnel roster with full descriptions, daily logs, photographs from our assignment files pinned to the wall. I wrote Orlov's name 50 times on a piece of paper, forcing the details into permanence. Dark hair, thin face, always cold, from Leningrad. 24 years old. Already the memories felt secondhand, like reading about a stranger. Petrov didn't participate in our documentation frenzy. He sat apart, staring at the wall of photographs we'd created. When he finally spoke, his voice carried certainty. "It's hunting us in sequence, military rank at youngest to oldest. It took Orlov because he was newest, least established in our group memory. I'll be next. Local hire, just 8 months here. Then Volkov, then Kuznetsov. Sokolov last because he's commanded longest." "How do we stop it?" I asked. "Inuit hunters have a method. You can't look at Ijiraq directly. It hides from focused attention, but you can photograph it, fix it in time, make it real in a way memory cannot." He gestured to the camera we used for documentation reports. Standard issue, black and white film. We go outside. We photograph everything. If it appears in the image, we have proof, evidence that exists independent of our minds. Sokolov considered this. And if it doesn't appear, then we know we're dealing with something that can't be captured. That knowledge itself is valuable. We prepared for exterior documentation, full Arctic gear, weapons, camera equipment. Kuznetsov would remain inside at the radio, maintaining transmission attempts. The rest of us would systematically photograph every meter of Post 47's perimeter. I loaded my rifle with hands that shook from more than cold. The Mosin Nagant felt inadequate against an enemy that attacked memory itself. What good were bullets against something that could erase you from having existed? Sokolov gathered us at the door. If anyone starts to forget, if the count drops, we abort immediately. Retreat to the bunker. Understood? We clipped onto the rope line. The wind had increased, visibility down to 3 meters, perfect conditions for something that hid in peripheral vision. I took the first photograph. Flash powder ignited, briefly illuminating the swirling snow. Empty tundra. I advanced the film, moved 10 paces along the rope, took another shot. Petrov photographed the fuel depot. Sokolov documented the radio masts. We worked methodically, creating a visual record of Post 47's exterior. On my 7th photograph, the image through the viewfinder showed 5 figures on the rope line. I lowered the camera. 3 of us stood outside. Sokolov, Petrov, myself. 3. I looked through the viewfinder again. 5 figures, 2 additional shapes, humanoid but wrong. Their proportions shifted between frames, height changing, limbs elongating and contracting. They stood among us on the rope line, perfectly integrated into our formation. "Sergeant Major," I called over the wind. "How many of us came outside?" Sokolov turned. I watched him count. His face went rigid. 3. You, me, Petrov. The camera shows 5. He crossed to me, looked through the viewfinder. I heard his breathing change. When he pulled away, his expression carried the blank horror of a man confronting impossible truth. "We're not alone out here," he said. "We never were." The radio crackled in our headsets. Kuznetsov's voice, high with panic. How many came outside? I logged 3 departure, but I'm counting 4 shapes through the observation slit, 4 shapes on the rope line. Who's the 4th? Who? The transmission dissolved into that mechanical breathing. Then Kuznetsov's voice again, but wrong. Perfect pronunciation. No fear. No humanity. Private Ivan Kuznetsov, born Moscow 1921, posted post 47, January 1943. Tomorrow no one remembers. Tomorrow never existed. Tomorrow just 3 men wondering why they have 4 bunks. Silence. I looked at Sokolov and Petrov. The count held steady. 3 of us. Who had we left at the radio? Someone. There had been someone at the radio, I was certain. But the name wouldn't surface. The face was already dissolving from memory like frost in sunlight. We abandoned the photography mission and retreated to the bunker. The radio room was empty. Equipment running, headset hanging from its hook, logbook open to a half-finished entry. The handwriting looked familiar, but I couldn't place whose it was. 4 bunks in the sleeping quarters, 4 sets of personnel files, 4 chairs at the table. Had there ever been 5? Petrov moved through the bunker with systematic precision, checking every corner, every shadow. He found something in the storage room, a coffee mug, still warm, with a name stenciled on the side. I read it 3 times, but the letters wouldn't form coherent meaning. My brain refused to process the information. "It's accelerating," Petrov said, "taking memories faster. We won't last until the supply run." Sokolov sat at the table, that 3-fingered hand pressed against his forehead. The Winter War taught me that some battles can't be won through conventional tactics. Sometimes survival means choosing retreat over engagement. "We can't retreat," I said. "There's nowhere to go. 200 kilometers to the nearest outpost through Kolyma winter, with something hunting us that exists in the spaces between perception. Then we don't retreat." Sokolov looked up, and I recognized the expression. Decision made, consequences accepted. We make ourselves impossible to forget. He stood and walked to the radio equipment, started pulling components, disconnecting cables, reassembling the transmitter into a configuration I didn't recognize. "Emergency protocol," Sokolov explained as he worked. "Designed for catastrophic scenarios. Border breach, enemy infiltration, personnel compromise. We broadcast our situation on every frequency. Repeat continuously. Make our presence so loud, so persistent, that we can't be erased from record." Petrov understood immediately. You're creating external memory. If we're broadcasting our names, our location, our situation, even if we forget ourselves, the transmission continues, evidence we existed. More than that, Sokolov connected the final cable. Every Soviet listening post from here to Moscow will record our signal. Archives, multiple redundant copies. Even if we vanish completely, the documentation survives. It was brilliant and desperate, and probably our only chance. Sokolov activated the modified transmitter. His voice, amplified and repeated across multiple frequencies simultaneously. "This is Post 47, Kolyma Sector. Sergeant Major Alexei Sokolov reporting critical situation. Entity contact, unknown hostile. Personnel status, 3 remaining. Junior Sergeant Dmitri Volkov, Private Yuri Petrov. Repeat, 3 personnel remaining. We are under attack by..." He paused. How do you describe something that attacks memory? How do you warn others about a predator that hides in the act of observation? Petrov leaned close to the microphone. "Ijiraq, the one that makes you forget. If you receive this transmission and later cannot remember receiving it, if records show contact but personnel have no recollection, that is confirmation. That is proof." The transmission began its loop. Our voices repeating our names, our situation, over and over. As long as the diesel generators ran, as long as the equipment functioned, we would continue to exist in the electromagnetic spectrum, even if we vanished from human memory. I volunteered for first watch while Sokolov and Petrov attempted rest. Someone needed to maintain the transmission, monitor for changes, document any new developments. I sat at the radio station, listening to our looped message broadcast into the Arctic night. That's when I noticed the photographs. We'd developed the perimeter documentation in the bunker's darkroom. The images hung on a wire to dry. I examined them systematically, looking for the additional figures I'd seen through the viewfinder. First 3 photographs, empty tundra, normal. Fourth photograph, a shadow at the edge of frame. Could be weather, could be equipment artifact. Fifth photograph, the shadow closer. Humanoid shape, but proportions wrong. Too tall. Limbs bent at angles that violated skeletal structure. Sixth photograph, multiple shadows. 3, maybe 4, standing among us on the rope line, perfectly integrated into our formation, but fundamentally wrong. Seventh photograph, direct image. I could see myself in frame, camera raised. Behind me, close enough to touch, stood something wearing human shape like an ill-fitting coat. Its face was a blur of features, constantly shifting, trying different configurations, eyes too far apart, then too close, mouth opening vertically instead of horizontally, then splitting into multiple mouths, then no mouth at all. The 8th photograph showed just Petrov and Sokolov. I wasn't in the image. I looked at my hands, solid, real. I existed, but the photograph insisted otherwise. The radio hissed. Our loop transmission continued, but underneath it, something else. That mechanical breathing, synchronized with the rhythm of our broadcast, learning, mimicking. Then my own voice from the speakers, but wrong. Perfect diction. No emotional variance. Junior Sergeant Dmitri Volkov, born Stalingrad 1921, posted post 47, March 1943. Tomorrow no one remembers. Tomorrow never existed. Tomorrow just 2 men wondering why they have 3 bunks. I woke Sokolov and Petrov, showed them the photographs, played back the radio transmission. We stood together in the bunker's harsh electric light, confronting the evidence of our systematic erasure. "It's inside the compound," Sokolov said quietly. "Maybe always was. Maybe we brought it with us. Maybe it was here first and we built Post 47 on its hunting ground." Petrov studied the photograph showing the thing behind me. "Inuit elders say Ijiraq can be banished, not killed. It's not alive in any way we understand, but forced away, made to hunt elsewhere." How? You have to see it completely, force it into full visibility, acknowledge its presence so totally that it can no longer hide in peripheral vision, but that's dangerous. Looking directly at Ijiraq, really seeing it, the human mind isn't structured to process what it is. The act of true seeing can break you. "We're already broken," I said. "We've forgotten how many of us came here. We're forgetting ourselves. What's left to break?" Sokolov moved to the weapons locker, pulled out flares, the bright chemical kind used for emergency signaling. "We force visibility. Flood the compound with light. Photograph everything. Whatever appears in the images, we confront directly." It wasn't much of a plan, but we were down to 3 men, our minds fragmenting, our existence being erased from reality, one memory at a time. Desperation breeds innovation. We prepared for a final exterior mission, maximum illumination, full documentation, direct confrontation with whatever hunted us from the spaces between human perception. I loaded the camera with fresh film, checked my rifle. The weapon still felt inadequate, but I was past caring about conventional effectiveness. Sometimes the act of resistance matters more than its chance of success. Petrov spoke a prayer in Yakut. I didn't understand the words, but I recognized the tone. We were about to do something that violated natural law. Best to make peace with whatever waited beyond. We exited into screaming wind and darkness. Sokolov fired the first flare. Red chemical light erupted overhead, painting the compound in crimson illumination. Shadows fled across snow, but some shadows moved wrong, against the wind, toward us instead of away. I triggered the camera. Flash powder ignited. In that brief moment of exposure, I saw them. 7 figures surrounding the bunker, humanoid frameworks wearing flesh like suggested clothing, faces that cycled through possible configurations without settling on any. Some stood on the ground, some stood on the air itself, vertical orientation divorced from gravity. They were all looking at us. Petrov fired a second flare. Green light. The figures remained visible, no longer hiding now that we'd acknowledged their presence. One of them moved closer, and I could see it trying to stabilize its form. Height shifting between 2 and 3 meters, arms extending, retracting, multiplying. It was attempting to become something we could understand, something our minds could accept. It failed. Human perception isn't equipped to process an entity that exists primarily in the dimension of memory rather than space. I raised my rifle, aimed at the central mass of the closest figure, fired. The bullet passed through empty air, but the thing reacted, flinched, not from physical impact, from the act of focused aggression, from being perceived as a target, from being defined as an enemy rather than an erasure. Sokolov and Petrov opened fire, the mechanical rhythm of Mosin Nagant rifles in Arctic cold. Bolt action, eject, reload, fire. We weren't hitting anything physical, but each shot was an act of acknowledgement. You are real. You are here. You are hostile. We refused to forget. The figures began to fragment, breaking apart into geometric impossibilities, pieces separating and reforming according to rules that made my eyes hurt. The thing closest to me opened what might have been a mouth. Sound emerged, not voice, but the audio equivalent of visual static, meaning without language. Then they were gone. Not retreating, not hiding, simply absent, as if they'd never been there at all. The photographs proved otherwise. 7 figures, clearly visible, surrounding 3 Soviet scouts who refused to be erased. We stood in the dispersing flare light, weapons ready, waiting for the next phase, but nothing came. The wind continued. The snow fell. Post 47 sat in the Arctic darkness, suddenly ordinary again. Petrov lowered his rifle. They'll come back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not this month, but Ijiraq returns to good hunting grounds. Then we leave them evidence, Sokolov said. Documentation, photographs, testimony, warning for whoever comes after. We returned to the bunker. Our looped radio transmission continued, broadcasting our names into the void. Junior Sergeant Dmitri Volkov, Sergeant Major Alexei Sokolov, Private Yuri Petrov, 3 men, real, present, refusing to be forgotten. The supply plane arrived 6 days later. The crew found 3 personnel instead of the expected 5, but the documentation explained nothing. According to all official records, Post 47 had only ever been staffed by 3 scouts. We were transferred to Magadan for debriefing. I told them everything. They listened politely, then assigned me to a new posting. Arctic exposure, they said, mental fatigue, common in isolated deployments. But they kept the photographs, added them to classified files I was never cleared to see again, and somewhere in Moscow's archives, a radio transmission loops eternally 3 names, 3 men who stood in Kolyma darkness and refused to vanish. I'm 78 now, retired, living in a small apartment in Novosibirsk. Sometimes I wake from dreams and can't remember if there were 3 of us at Post 47, or 5 or 7. The number slides away like oil on ice. But I have the photographs, proof that something hunted us, proof that we survived, proof that some battles are won not through violence, but through the stubborn refusal to stop existing. My grandchildren ask me about the war sometimes. I don't tell them this story. How do you explain to children that memory itself can be predator and prey simultaneously? Instead, I show them the photograph of 3 Soviet scouts standing in Arctic snow, rifles raised, firing at shapes that shouldn't exist, and I tell them the most important truth I learned in Kolyma. Some things hide in the spaces between moments of attention, but if you look directly, if you refuse to let your focus slide away, if you document and testify and make yourself impossible to forget, Then you survive. Even if you're the only one who remembers that survival was necessary,